I'd like to call to order, please, the work session on Monday, July 7th, 2014, 5 o'clock. And just to remind council, the regular meeting will be starting right at 6 o'clock because we have public hearings, okay? All right. So as I look around the table, Councilman Councilman, and I think you're here, Bill Stiff and Councilman Joanne Osborne will not be here. I think Bill is going to be here. Yes, we're going to do that in just a moment. But I think Bill is going to be here for the meeting. Is that correct? Correct. All right. Yes. So all in favor of excusing...
Can't excuse a work session at the meeting.
Oh, so I have to wait. Thanks. Good. We have one item on tonight's work session agenda, and that is a review of the Goodyear AZ TAP report. Brian Dalkey will start, and our city manager, and will you please introduce our guests?
It would be my privilege and pleasure. Mayor and council, thank you. I'm excited about tonight. Urban Land Institute, you're going to have an opportunity to learn more about them, specifically what our Arizona group does. And we're going to be talking about what we affectionately call ASTAP, which is the Arizona Technical Assistance Panel. So tonight, and I'll have a few other remarks after this, but tonight we do have three individuals that are affiliated with Urban Land Institute. Kristen Busby, and you've been there 2 months now, but one of the directors there, and comes with a real strong planning background. John Vlaming, who did an amazing job at our panel in capturing the detailed information, and then Mitch Rosen. John Vlaming, he's with Stella Polaris, LLC, and then Mitch Rosen, Papago Park Center, which is my old digs when I worked for Salt River Project years ago. But both gentlemen are actually part of the ASTAP committee, so it's great to have them and their leadership. One of the things, I really do have a lot of regard for Urban Land Institute. It's, and again, you'll find out more about it. But I've had the privilege of serving on the advisory board now for some time. And actually, it was last year where we requested, I said, hey, we want to be considered for a panel. So they actually go through a process where they'll consider the request. And we started working with ASTAP, or actually ULI Arizona, back in December of last year. And then it was April Fool's Day, April 1st, we actually had an opportunity to showcase our city where we went out and gave tours of the community. We prepared a very extensive briefing book for them as well. Then finally, it was April 2nd, and that's what you'll hear about tonight. But April 2nd, we had the all-day panel, of which I consider some of the best experts out there in the field. And these individuals were carefully chosen for Goodyear based on their expertise, based on the value they could bring us. But we're excited about the presentation tonight. I'm turning it over to the experts. And I would just ask, do you want questions along the way, or how would you like that as you go through, or if that works?
Sure. Yeah, I think questions along the way.
Sure. I think they're more comfortable if you don't mind doing that because, you go too far and you forget the thoughts. So
Great.
catch us while it's fresh. Thank you.
Okay, so Kristen, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Brian, Mayor Lord, members of the Goodyear City Council. Thank you for inviting us tonight. It's our pleasure to be here. And as Brian introduced us, I am actually the newest member to the ULI Arizona District Council. So I didn't have the good fortune of being here on the job for this particular project, the Goodyear ASTAP, but this will be one of my core areas to focus on going forward. So I appreciate being here and being amongst this panel tonight. So just to tell you, just briefly, our agenda tonight, talk a little bit about ULI and the Arizona District Council, to tell you about who we are, and then we're going to delve into the Goodyear ASTAP report, the process, the findings, and the recommendations, and then answer any questions you have along the way. The mission of ULI for Arizona District Council and then ULI Global is to provide leadership in the responsible use of land and creating and sustaining thriving communities worldwide. ULI now is in 95 countries across the globe. We are expanding. And 30,000 members. And in Arizona alone, we're one of the largest district councils. We have almost 1,000. We're hoping to hit the 1,000 number this year. And ULI was formed in 1936 as a research think tank, but then over the decades following, started having district councils in various regions and states. And in Arizona, we were formed in the 80s, just out of a direct need to provide programs, more locally, based on our own needs. And as Brian said, we do have an advisory board that leads us, as comprised of public and private thought leaders. And we are membership driven, so almost everything we do is by the good members that, like Brian and John and Mitch that sit here today, that we focus on core competencies that provide community impact and technical assistance like the ASTAP program. And I will tell you, very busy so far being there for the 2 months, because we do provide over, probably, I think that number might be a little short, maybe 40 educational programs and events held each year. So in addition to some of the technical assistance work we do. Oops. Of course, I'll get that thing back on. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the technical advisory panel. This is something that's done both from ULI National and also at the district council level. Arizona, our district council, we're statewide. Some district councils, like there'll be ULI San Diego or ULI LA or the North Carolina Triangle. Arizona, we're statewide. But this is one of our premier programs, and it was instituted to provide communities and local governments and help and assistance in grappling with their biggest challenges around planning and development and land use. And the goal is to provide local governments access to industry thought leaders, the best and brightest, as Brian said, and in industry and in advisory capacity, and kind of delving into what those strategic opportunities and challenges are. So this is done. We've essentially, as Brian said, the panels are carefully chosen, and they're comprised of professionals who volunteer their time. All of ULI, the committees and such are from the members that volunteer their time. But when we go into a community and based on whatever their issues are, we carefully select the panelists to kind of delve into those based on their knowledge and their screen for their objectivity. Experts then are able to provide their recommendations, and respond to specific questions that are posed then by the community. And then the ultimate process is all documented in a report, which I think all of you have a copy of now, our documented report for your consideration. Typically, the time frame for an ASTAP, it takes generally about 3 to 4 months from the start. We start talking with the community, and it just depends on the complexity of the issues. We define the challenge, and we develop and refine the questions. Some communities might just have one question that they're grappling with, whether it's like downtown redevelopment, or some of them have several questions, which I think John will get into with this particular ASTAP. And then we have to go through a process to identify who is going to be involved in the advisory panel process based on their expertise. And then the community, as Brian mentioned, you provided a briefing book that happened before we did come in and do the orientation trip, and then the ASTAP panel day. And then we also schedule a tour, usually about just the day before the panel meets, to go in and take a look of the study area and the site. And then on the panel day, it's generally an all-day event, and it's open typically to the public and to stakeholders. And then we prepare you the summary report within 30 days of the panel meeting. And so the summary report, which John is going to go and Mitch are going to go very much into the specifics of how it's laid out, but typically this is the structure for it, is to capture all the observations and the recommendations from the day. We have an executive summary, make sure that we list all of the driving questions that that were trying to be answered for that day. the various background into the question is supported there, and then also the panelists' discussions and what they identified as strengths and opportunities, challenges. And then the implementation program is really the most important part, with the specific strategies and the recommendations for action, and typically associated with some sort of a time frame, whether it's short-term, mid-term, or long-term. I'm going to be turning this over to John, but just to leave you with a slide that gives you some of the testimonials from some of the recent ASTAPs we've had. And actually, we have some probably more recent ones, because I think the City of Phoenix, we recently did one on their 32nd Street corridor, looking at redevelopment opportunities, connectivity along that corridor, Gila Bend, looking at housing and development opportunities to leverage the solar energy and related manufacturing that's happening there, Carefree, the downtown area, which actually now has turned into the recommendations of providing the foundation, and now they're delving into a downtown and town center plan now as we speak. So there's been some really good outcomes from, I think, these technical advisory panels that communities have found very valuable. So hopefully you will the same, and I'm going to turn it over to John and let him, and then Mitch also, and let them delve into the specifics of the Goodyear ASTAP.
Great. Well, thank you, Kristen. So the overall report that you have in front of you, it's meant to be very concise and strategic. There's really kind of 7 key areas that we delve into, and Kristen provided a nice background. The report starts off with the acknowledgments, the overview of the panel, the executive summary. If you didn't read anything else, read the executive summary. The overview of Goodyear, which is in large measure culminated from the briefing book that staff puts together, and then the strategies and actions for consideration. And that's where really kind of the rubber hits the road. And then lastly, the implementation program. What are short-term, mid-term, and long-term kinds of approaches dealing with the priorities of the strategies identified? And then the appendix really talks about the supportive information that goes along with the process. So Kristen kind of alluded to the key questions, and in some communities there are only 1 or 2 questions depending on the complexity of the issues to be addressed. In others, they're much more complex, like we had for the study area here in Goodyear. So the 7 key questions really revolve around identity and vision, corridor connectivity, transportation, land use, and then also the last 3, tenant strategies, educational providers, and design guidelines. So having said that, the area that we're talking about here, that I'll talk about in a minute, is really about 3,700 acres bounded by I-10 on the north, MC-85, Litchfield, and Estrella. And so the real focus here is how to take a look at this area and really make sure it represents and is implemented as the premier employment area for Goodyear going forward. The first part of the document is the acknowledgments. We really wanted to give a shout out here to staff. We really couldn't do the work we do without having a partner on the other side of the table, that's city staff. Brian and Sherry and Katie in particular were really key in putting the briefing book together, organizing some of the component pieces of the tour, and those kinds of things that help to make our job a whole lot easier in trying to organize the information and do what we need to do on our end to make it a success. So we really wanted to acknowledge that it's truly a partnership between ULI and the cities and the areas that we serve. The executive summary, just kind of an overview of the community, the ASTAP process, and then key questions and suggested strategies. And really, those are the short-term strategies. So if you didn't read anything else in the 38 pages, read the executive summary, and it'll give you the boiled-down version, Reader's Digest, if you will. The technical assistance panel, the overview, that's where the document starts out with. It has a lot of the information that Kristen just shared with you in terms of the background for Urban Land Institute, what the TAP does, what does the ULI Arizona District Council do, and what was the process that we went through. Again, we started out in the fall, conducted the process and the panel day and the tour in April 1st and 2nd, and here we are with the final report. So the overview of Goodyear, again, this is in large measure based on the briefing book that was put together by Katie and others. And it really just has a number of key areas, starting with setting, the location of the area that I talked about earlier, the history of the area in terms of some of the background, the development conditions in terms of how much it's built out relative to the existing land use pattern, the land ownership, private, public ownership, and the amount of commercial development and what kind of level of commercial development exists. This area has been subject to a number of investment relative to study area plans and studies, so those were acknowledged going in as well. It's always good to understand that planning foundation and development foundation as we move forward through the process. What's the utility framework look like under the ground and above the ground? And looking at the special features, what are those assets that currently exist within the study area that we need to build on? Are there opportunities there to leverage those kinds of investments that the city has already made? And you can see there's a number of investments that have been made there that speak very well to the city. Demographic and economics, certainly there's some information there that give the panelists a real good understanding of what the underlying foundation for the city is. Strategies and actions for consideration, and this is really where the rubber meets the road. The way we've organized this particular section is underneath each of the 7 questions, we have background information and really the genesis of the panel discussion that was that occurred, throughout the day. So this was 8 hours of panel discussion moderated by Pete Bolton that really is boiled down and sets the stage for the identification of the strategies and the supportive actions. And then those actions are really, again, identified for short, mid, and long term. So question number 1 really deals with identity and vision, some of the strategies and actions for consideration, continue to emphasize Goodyear as the city of choice. The panel discussion, one of the things we talked about there was, a concerted economic development strategy. Strategies in action, really proactively market the education system. Some of those leads and relocates that you've had here relative to this particular campus with Franklin Pierce, and really leveraging that to other types of private universities as well. So there's other strategies up there as well, but I don't want to really belabor the point. It gives you kind of a flavoring for the first question. Corridor connectivity. Within the study area, there really were 3 corridors identified: Litchfield Road over to the east, Bullard in the middle, and then Estrella Parkway over on the west. Each of the 3 have different kinds of functions. They're all somewhat intertwined geographically and also kind of conceptually and rationally across the city. And so, for Litchfield, looking at aggressively revitalizing that corridor, there's certainly some underutilized properties there that could be redeveloped. One of the thoughts, again, was looking at higher density residential for some of those underutilized properties to help create a population component that might help to make the existing retail that's there more viable, and also to give it a character that is the historic gateway of the city and how to re-leverage that going forward. One of those ideas might be looking at small incubator space for startups. Really provide that as a backbone to that particular corridor.
Joe?
Question?
Where does McDowell Road fit into this?
Actually, it doesn't, because Interstate 10 was our northern boundary.
Okay.
So it was Interstate 10, MC 85, Litchfield, and Estrella.
Okay.
So about 3,700 acres in our area. So we really didn't look outside those boundaries. However, there was discussion about Estrella Falls, as you might imagine. It's certainly going to be the retail engine for this particular region. It obviously and had some implications for some of the discussion relative to city center. So,
Sherry?
any other questions? I'm sorry.
Yes, I guess that kind of goes in what I was noticing when you're saying, our city is very little bit built out, like 10%, and we've got all this growth. Most of the growth is going to happen up towards Estrella, past into the mountain, and that area seems to, and I understand you just picked a study area, but it seems like that leaves out where the population is going to be when we're talking about these issues of connectivity and shopping, that where most of the population base is going to be in the future seems to be left out a little bit.
Yeah, I can appreciate that question. I think when you go back to what I'll call the process design for this particular project, it was really focusing the activity on how do we establish a premier employment area for the area on both sides of Bullard, kind of bounded by Litchfield and Estrella. And so the idea there was to really look at employment as that primary driver, but also some of the other components that would come into play to make that fabric kind of what the city wants it to be in the future. There's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, cancer treatment centers, PGA, a number of the baseball complex. There's a number of pieces to that, and so the complexity of that area, we thought, really required us to focus our vision and kind of sharpen our pencils for questions and answers for that particular area.
And I think that you're looking more at density there than you would say up in the Australia area, because that's still, different types of residential and not so much commercial intermixed. So I'm assuming what I got out of this is that we have the land right now within this area to get more density, and we just have to look at it that way and be able to produce that, so. Yeah, Brian?
And Mayor and Council, if I may, just to add to what John was just talking about, we were specific in these boundaries too. Understand that we just came off of an economic development focus on success strategic plan for economic development. Many parts of our community are defined either by zoning, projects that are already underway. You have the Canyon Trails Town Center certainly there. There was a former Vestar project, McDowell Road Corridor, where that one is where there's $50 million worth of infrastructure that really is going to be more retail focused. This was one, as much as anything, it gave us a reality check. We did want them to hit City Center. Originally, we were looking at Estrella Parkway. We said, let's go a little bit west and actually include City Center and the University Park because of higher education. It was to focus on the airport, knowing that, there were some downturns that were going on with Lockheed Martin. What can we do around the airport area? Litchfield Road, a lot of vacant buildings. What can we do there? And then this will be one of our largest employment hubs, one of our largest job centers, well, one of the largest in the Metro Phoenix area. So it was really to start to focus on more specifically, and it is compatible with the economic development strategic plan focus on success, but it went a little deeper, and it really tried, and the ballpark area is certainly within this area. So it tried to hit some of the major components that we want to build off of, or look at redevelopment opportunities. That was a thought behind it.
If I can say one more
Mitch, go
thing,
ahead.
yes. And as you know, I'm a big fan of Goodyear, and I spent a lot of time over the years here.
Good.
I did.
Just for the public, because they listen in this, you can pull the microphone closer to you and just tell them why you feel so, that you know Goodyear so well.
Well, I worked here for 12 years when I worked for Suncor Development Company, and some of the projects, including the Sub-Zero building, the repositioning of the Wigwam outlet malls, the Palm Valley Office Park Phase 1, 2, and 3, the condos across from the office condos across from the YMCA, are just some of the projects I was involved with. And I look back and I think they all have stood well the test of time. And to your point about sort of what do we look at, because we have so many opportunities. And I think that's one of the challenges with the town too, with the city too, and that is there are so many places. And I think what this does is establishes a very sound building block, one place to focus on, because I think one of the concerns is if you don't do something really good, you'll be all over the place. And I think you'll miss out on a really good opportunity that this defined area is because of its proximity to the I-10 freeway and its readiness as the next development phase comes through. So I think that's what some of the history was, thinking about this as a building block. There are plenty of other places, but to make sure not to miss this one. Thank you.
And I think it has a stronger move towards increasing our revenue within the city, a tax base within the city, and it attracts people here that would move up to Estrella area
That's why I
for
was
their
just wondering
homes.
to
So
see.
yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on. So corridor connectivity, Estrella Parkway is the gateway and primary corridor for the marketing trail. And what do we mean by that? really one of the things that kind of bubbled to the top was, from the brokerage community, was the way they take their prospects out here to the West Valley, and in particular Goodyear. They come down Estrella Parkway. And so knowing that and building that into the equation is really an important piece to really show off the city in the best possible way. And there's certainly a lot of pieces to that puzzle that are making it positive, but to continue that trend, looking at opportunities to leverage those kinds of destinations for the brokerage side to kind of bring those folks down and really show the best side of Goodyear. So working with that real estate brokerage to determine and confirm kind of trail destinations and linkages, you know, throughout the community for those kinds of tours, and really looking at public-private partnerships going forward as well.
I think it's very interesting. After I read this, I did go ahead and drive with a different set of eyes than I've been doing. And I really saw some very easy fixes and some difficult ones. But we've kind of missed out on the detail. It's like your home. You kind of tidy up. When company comes, well, we're not really tidied up yet when we bring all those realtors in. So I really could see some movement that we need to make. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
You know, I think I spoke earlier about the role and uses of the city center, the ballpark, and the regional mall site. This was the subject of a lot of discussion amongst the group that day for those of you who were at panel day. There was an acknowledgement that the ballpark complex is extremely well done, but certainly, you know, the absence of retail and that ability to keep people around and keep them linger in the city was something that was noted. So there's some strategies associated with how do we keep folks around longer. It might be temporary kinds of restaurant or adult beverage kinds of situations there around the ballpark, or some other kinds of things that would happen along with the ball games to really make more of a destination, more of an event, and keep people around longer within the area. That might also include a hotel at the appropriate amount of time. You know, Bullard Wash for greater density and intensity. You know, while the primary use is going to be for employment, you know, like the mayor noted, higher density residential is something that could be an easy piece to the puzzle here.
Sorry.
That's normal work.
That's okay.
Oh,
Sure.
we heard it was coming.
Uh-oh, is it a dust storm?
Oh, dust storm? No.
Yeah.
911.
I probably have everything on mine, too.
Mitch, did you want to make a point? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we all have it
Everybody's
coming.
got it.
So while we're waiting, I'll ask a question, if it's okay.
Oh, sure, please.
I'd like to go back to your previous slide because I just thought about it. You were talking about using Estrella Parkway as the gateway tour. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we come in and go up and down. Where do we get over to Bullard? And where do we get over to Litchfield Road? How do we show prospective folks looking at our city the wonderful airport park that we have?
Mm-hmm. And that's part of kind of the next step would be, you know, where are those originations and destinations? Once you get off I-10 onto Estrella, you know,
What do
where do
you
you
do?
go from there? What's the tour? And so everybody's kind of on the same page of what that tour is and what are the highlights that you know, should be shown in the city that really gets to kind of the targeted industries. Like Brian had noted earlier, you just went through an economic strategic plan. How do you kind of mesh that tour with the strategic industries that the city wants to capture here?
And that's for the city to decide and
The
then
city getting
disseminate
together-
it to other brokers or whoever
Getting
else that
together
comes
with
to
the
look at it.
brokerage community, and
Okay.
there was some broker representation at panel day, and I think they could probably be very helpful
I bet.
toward that end, and I think they'd be
Okay.
very willing to share that information with you. And, you know,
Because that's important, too.
it's extremely important, and they
You
can
know.
certainly share when they've been on the tour, you know, the things they like, the things to really promote,
Right.
the other things that maybe didn't go over so well.
Right.
And
Okay.
so it's really a nice opportunity to link up with that brokerage community who has kind of the boots on the ground with those potential relocates.
Okay.
I think that's important. Did we ever follow up on the one brokerage, I think it was Lions, that came through after I was on that panel?
Yes.
They did come through. Did we get a report from them or anything?
I can follow up with you offline, but yes, there's an interest in a project in Goodyear right now.
Okay, from that tour. Okay, thanks.
Also, to follow up on your question about brokers' tours and touring the city, there'll be reference later in the document to design guidelines,
I saw that.
where the city can proactively, thematically create different environments for different experiences. So Australia may not feel the same way as Litchfield, but they're deliberate rather than haphazard in how they approach it. And that's the bigger picture planning process. And then as projects get developed, communities require, through encouragement, the development of frontage to happen in certain ways so that there's a theme rather than just driving around. Also, to go back one thought with regard to the ballpark, and just to put it into your mind, in Tempe, they have a parking lot that becomes a sort of a food party where all of these different food vendors come in their trucks, and it's a temporary thing, and then they leave. It's something to think about as it relates to trying to keep people at your venues for a longer period of time, sort of like a farmer's market theme, but this is for these food trucks that do it. Some of them are very high-end in the food that they produce. Something to think about.
Let's see, where were we?
We're on the connectivity. We just finished that
I think so, so I think we're
on
here
the
at
panel,
transport.
ballpark.
I think we're here at transportation.
Okay.
And so the southern boundary of our study area is MC 85. There was some focus on the discussion there, how it's evolving in terms of its ability and capability to serve industrial types of uses. There was also some discussion about potentially serving as an inland port going forward. A lot of discussion about the future completion of the 303 I-10 interchange and what that means for industrial use. The term of art was a game changer, so be ready for that when that happens. Strategies going forward, really looking for the city to advocate, to accelerate, and kind of contribute, looking at opportunities. How do you advance that infrastructure for transportation with a payback of being potential relocate positive going forward? So it really helps out your site location types of activities going forward. Land use, exploring the potential for higher density and higher intensity and mixed uses. Certainly over time, that's going to be something that could be kind of in the longer term. It appeared that most of the discussion, because it's revolving around a 3 to 5 year window here, the real near-term opportunities in the corridors are really for higher density residential, either to replace underutilized retail over on the Litchfield corridor, potential to be a buffer over on Estrella to employment uses heading east, and then, in strategic places along Bullard that might work well being located along an improved Bullard Wash area. So looking at higher density residential as a component to this particular area bodes well, helps the retail capabilities going forward. But really, most of the discussion was for true mixed use, meaning it's vertically integrated, so you have potential retail on the bottom and residential above, kind of like the illustration shows. That's really looking like something that's going to be a little further out in the future. So kind of FYI there, kind of moving forward. And so that's up to question 4. I'll turn it over to Mitch for question 5 here.
And do I push this way?
Yes.
Okay? That's good.
And if you don't mind bringing the mic towards you, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Like Star Trek, Next Generation. Before I get into the first slide, I want to make a comment, and that is with regard to tenant strategies, I think the city does it well. And I want to use a sports analogy for a moment, and that is every time I see a professional football team win or lose, they always say they're going to go work on everything and make it better. Whatever it is that they're doing, they're just constantly trying to push it and make it better. And so my observation, I know I should be talking about, you guys do it well. So now the question is, how do you do it even better? And that's what I think some of these tenant strategies talk about here. So you'll see in the action component of this, talking about assisting Aero Turbine with maximizing its facilities, And then also, and you'll see this reoccurring, which is to support the supply chain components. That is to try and build on what you already have, your strengths that you have here. Look at your cores, and when you see something that is going to be a complement, do whatever possible to encourage that to occur, because those are going to build on each other. I referenced the Sub-Zero deal. They're now expanding. So
basically what you're saying is that we really need to have deeper conversations with our businesses. Otherwise, Aero Turbine does need things maybe that they go around to different states or different companies.
Absolutely.
To run their business.
Yeah. One of the things
So we should go in and target that and sit down and say, okay, tell us what you do and what you put into it so that we can actually go out and seek that.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, with regard to Lockheed Martin, maintain communications, continue to foster that relationship. While one part of their organization is changing, it is growing in other areas, and how you guys capitalize on that is important to making a negative turn into a positive. And this goes to the accountability component of it, which is developing a schedule to meet with those companies. Just doing it better. And I'm amazed how cities accept that certain companies are here, chase after all the new ones, and forget about who's already here. And that's the hard work, it's here.
We learned that this last week. We toured a company and we learned that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And we learned a lesson that there was so much more to it than we had any idea. So I don't think that's going to happen again. I think we're going to be on top of all the companies now.
Well, again, you guys do it well. So, okay, moving on to the next, which is working with Luke Air Force Base to capitalize on the presence of the F-35 training mission. Again, the spin-off supply chain off-base opportunities over the next number of years is just waiting to be tapped. And the relationship between Luke and the airport you have here and the kind of things that can happen as a result of that is unique. Nowhere else in this state. They also talked about unmanned aerial systems. This is just one of the examples of the kind of things that you can foster here, support here. Moving on to strategies and actions, provide temporary restaurants. That's what I talked about before. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I think that is a wonderful idea, the food trucks, like Kierland Resort does that in the summertime, they have food truck day where people right around the pools, and just reading your slides and stuff, and I don't know how easy this is something we could do, like we were up in San Francisco, and they had the World Cup game on in front of their city hall with food vendors out there. So, I mean, and people just would come out of the offices
show
and
up.
watch and buy things and sit there and watch. So I love that idea.
Yeah, and let me push that just a little bit. I'm sensitive to time. I was at a ULI conference in Vancouver, and one of the things that came out of it, a community, and this is to think about how other communities are competing for your employees, is they were trying to push arts in their community, and they decided that their ballet studio was going to have a projection of the ballet on the outside of their building. So that you would go in and you'd watch the ballet, you'd pay for a ticket, you'd watch the ballet, but while it was playing, it was going on the outside of the building. Oh my gosh, we don't want that because we want people to come in and pay. No, what they wanted to do is engage the community and have it be a proactive approach. And the mindset is, how do you reach out to the community in different ways than others have done it, to try and do something, and maybe the food trucks won't work, but it's a mindset of how you might want to reach out to a community to encourage those type of things. And the last bullet point in the strategy is enhanced scheduling of entertainment, event, and/or athletics on the ball fields during non-spring training times of the year. Those times when those facilities are not in use for spring training. They have. I'm sure that you guys have thought about that, but I'll put in a little plug for lacrosse because I noticed the Australia has a really good lacrosse program. They do. Okay. Now moving on to the strategies for the Cancer Treatment Center, create a biotech healthcare district around the Cancer Treatment Center, strategies and actions, research science, medical stimulation, medical fab, incubator, diagnostics. These are all things that can go on around there. difficult to have done over the last couple of years, much easier to think about and implement over the next coming years. Market and attract university partners to the district, attract biotech components consisting of medical simulation and medical sterilization employers. Just ideas to try and think about. This, I think, is very important, is to create a healthcare master plan to expand existing and to attract healthcare entities. So you've worked so hard to create that environment. You have so much opportunity around it. What is the long-term master plan look like around it? This idea, and now we're moving on to the next question, is with regard to leveraging healthcare opportunities for industrial employers. You hear these words, shovel-ready sites, kicked around all the time. But activity breeds more activity, and anything that you can do to cause things to happen will cause more things to happen. Again, look at Sub-Zero, and it's expanding here. And then it is difficult in today's environment to foster speculative industrial development because banks don't want to take the risk on those type of things. But again, anything you do, help partner with people to develop more space will create more activity in your community. And that's where you have certain tools, limited, but certain tools to consider appropriate incentives. Just proactively try and do those things to encourage it to happen. I'm finished with my portion of it, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
Yeah. I guess what's the next slide here?
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. This is still mine. Please
Yeah,
forgive me.
question 5, right.
Yeah, please forgive me. I saw educational providers, and this is now talking about the panel discussion about the 100-acre site for post. Oh, do I need to push the
Yeah,
button here?
just one more slide.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
The 100-acre site for post-secondary education is well located and large enough for several universities to be co-located. The second bullet point is to home in on recently retired or separated military personnel in STEM sciences and sports medicine. So again, it's looking at what you have as assets within your community and trying to foster that rather than trying to create new things. Look at what you have and celebrate those. Are you going to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. Retain and expand Franklin Pierce College. Market and locate private colleges in the city center. Evaluate the opportunity to locate vocational training entities. And I'll take questions before I hit the next slide if there are any. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Okay. This is hitting upon the design guidelines. We were talking about how you encourage the brokerage community, the front window, if you will. The idea that you have design guidelines that encourage these things would be helpful. Also, wayfinding signs, maybe city wayfinding signs. I know we did that up Litchfield Road when we were building lots of housing developments to encourage people to go into different directions. The recommendation here on Litchfield Road could acknowledge early development routes, access and visibility of Bullard and Australia corridors want an embraced approach. John, can you speak to that concept of embraced approach? Yeah, I'm sorry, enhanced approach. I'm sorry. Can you speak to that a little bit? And if I cut you off guard, I will.
You did.
Okay. I can do it. I thought.
Well, the
I thought you
enhanced
had-
approach talks about, streetscape and landscape improvements along those corridors. If it's going to be the marketing trail, you might think about, the next level up for design and for implementation along there to really create, the wow factor for these prospects coming down there. And so I think that was the idea going forward is that creates, an enhanced a nod to quality and a sustainability within the community as well.
Well, I agree. I think our tendency is, let's wait until the developer comes. All right, let's wait until this has to be done. Let's wait until we have to be done because it's money. It costs quite a bit. And so we're trying to use our resources, but you're right. We just have to make the city attractive. And it makes them feel like maybe they want to do something with the plot of land that's sitting behind that landscaped area or what. And so I think we need to find a way to do it cost effectively. So
Yeah, sometimes that can happen proactively by looking at an enhanced area and from a master planning standpoint, do it at a 5% level, but maybe in a couple strategic spots, do it at a 20 or 30% level. So you're taking the lead on encouraging certain things, like maybe a directional sign or an entry sign that creates a theme that you then say to the development community, this is what the theme that we want, and we want the things that you build within that to be similar or to match or to be a complement to that. That's the kind of way you can enhance the corridors that you were referring to, without having to spend necessarily a lot of money, just from a design standpoint, to take the lead on it proactively. Okay. I can't see that slide.
It's just
We can't either. That's why we're looking at
The good
our
news
iPads.
is, maybe you can see it in your book, but this is the implementation chapter here, and so it's really been organized as a light recipe book, if you will, to coordinating kind of the strategy, the question number as it relates to the strategy, and then each of the actions that are identified kind of in the middle of the table. And then a first cut at time frame, whether it's short, mid, or long term. Put a dot where it appears to be reasonable, where that might occur, as a first maybe thought to starting out for implementation on some of these recommendations going forward. So it's really to kind of prime the pump, if you will, so it's not just a plan that has some actions. It actually kind of takes it to maybe the next half step to kind of hand it off to staff to kind of carry forward on those actions that you consider to be doable and achievable. So that's really the way that particular section is organized at the back end of the document overall. And then lastly, there's an appendix back there, and again, that's really just the supportive information for the process as we proceeded through it. So, you know, there's the panel session, the briefing document, and some of those kinds of things that are under separate cover to move forward with. But again, you know, that's really the nuts and bolts of the plan itself, and then the process as well. So again, it's really been a pleasure to be a part of it. I think I can speak to everybody on the table here as well as the panelists. I think to kind of reemphasize what Brian said, you really had an all-star cast of panelists that day, and for any of you who are here, I think you heard some good give and take and some good ideas being generated during the course of the day.
Well, we want to thank you very much. Before you leave the table, we have any comments here from council? You
Just
feel like,
appreciate the efforts. It's a great book.
Thank you.
You've given council a lot to think about, and those of us that weren't there in the panel are going to have more conversation with the city manager and staff regarding this so that we can really, on some of them, I think we can be a little bit more aggressive than we have been. And I appreciate how you've laid it out for us, and I can understand the area that you are really targeting was our employment corridor, because nothing would revitalize that area more than if we developed that area. Right?
right on the same
Okay.
note. Thank you. Thank you for confirming that.
That's exciting.
Well, again,
It
it
is.
was great. And Brian, thank you for pursuing this, because you're the one that did that. And you said how important it would be and how effective it would be, so.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and I also do, and it was brought up before, but a lot of input, support from Sherry Wakefield Signs and Katie as well. So a lot of coordination on the part of staff. I'm up here to get the glory.
All right,
But
great.
yes, thank you.
Well, thank you.
And thank you very much, too.
All right, council, we're not going to do any information items here, and we're going to adjourn the meeting, but if you look at the clock, we have 10 minutes, so
Okay.
that's it.